Hello, and thank you so much to everyone for being here today. My name is Noah Remnick. I'm an educator and organizer with the Center for Justice at Columbia, and I'll be your moderator for tonight's discussion. I wanted to start by reiterating Geraldine's earlier thanks to everybody for being here. It's a really wonderful showing tonight. To Union for hosting, obviously, to CCA and the Communities Not Cages Coalition for being such leaders in this fight, to Judge Brown for her wisdom, and of course to Mr. Ricks. We are all proud to stand alongside you. We are grateful for your unflagging dedication to this cause, and we are incredibly grateful for your words here tonight. Thank you so much, truly, truly. Another round of applause. Tonight's discussion, as you've heard, is all about the Second Look Act and the broader state of resentencing legislation here in New York State. We'll be focusing on strategies for organizing that foreground incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people, their needs, their advocacy, their intellectual labor, their camaraderie, and ultimately their visions for liberation and a world without prisons. We have an incredible panel of scholars and organizers here with us tonight, as well as an equally wonderful group of scholars and advocates still behind bars, but nonetheless whose vision and whose labor and whose insights will be a major part of our discussion this evening. So we want to thank them for all their participation. You'll be hearing their words and from some of their family members who are in attendance, and we're grateful to have them here today as well. So without further ado, let me just ask my fellow panelists to briefly introduce themselves, if you don't mind. Want to kick it off with you?
Sure. My name is Serena Martin. I am a proud member of the Bedford Hills cohort. I am the executive director of New Hour, which runs programs throughout the jails on Long Island. We had a graduation just today of our leaders in reentry. And I just want to bring into this space Tammy, Pam Smart, Kim Brown, all of our women, Deb Pretlow is here and home, all of our women who are still behind bars that we fight for every day.
My name is Mujahideen Mohammed. I'm a research assistant at the Center for Justice at Columbia University, and I also founded a nonprofit organization called the Pillars of Promise, which consists of formerly incarcerated individuals who are committed to promoting positive images of incarcerated people and raising awareness about what makes them deserving of second chances.
My name is Steve Zeidman. I'm a professor at CUNY Law School, and I founded and co-direct our Second Look project. We've worked with about 200 people, been able to bring home about 84, but we have miles and miles to go. I'm so grateful to be here. I just have to say thank you to Mujahideen, Noah, Professor Downey, Judge Brown, CCA, Union Theological Seminary, and Mr. Ricks, thank you.
My name is Brian Fisher. I am a retired New York State Department of Corrections superintendent and commissioner. I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time at Sing Sing and in Albany, and my experience is why I'm here. I believe in second chance, but more importantly, I believe in the incarcerated persons and people that I've met over the years. And tonight, we can talk about what it really means to become incarcerated and what it means, hopefully, to get out. For what it's worth, and I should have said it upstairs, I know it doesn't change anything, but as a former warden and a commissioner, I personally apologize to you in the loss of your son.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Stevens. I'm a leadership fellow at the Center for Community Alternatives. I'm also the co-founder of Doing Sorry, which is a restorative justice organization dedicated to highlighting those incarcerated individuals who exemplify this concept of doing sorry and who are very focused on their futures and how they're going to promote healing in the world. I think that everyone here, Mr. Ricks, extends their condolences to you and your family. Many of us who saw that video, many of us who are formerly incarcerated, anyone who's a human being, will feel for you and your family. The brutality that happened, the dehumanization that happened, is something that no father should have to endure, and we are deeply, deeply in spirit with you, and mourning with you and your family. So.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Wilfredo Laracuente, and I've also done 20 years. I came home from Sing Sing Correctional Facility a little under 4 years ago. I'm tethered to the Center for Justice. I'm boots on the ground. I'm a work readiness instructor for Opportunities for a Better Tomorrow in Bushwick, Brooklyn. I work with the Reentry Advisory Board for the District Attorney's Office, and I also work with the Brownsville and the Bronx Peace Advisory Board for MOCJ. So it's a pleasure to be here.
So, Steve, I'd like to start with you. Before we get into the current proposed legislation, I want you to give us a little background here. Explain to us, if you can, the big picture predicament of excessive sentencing in New York State and how you see it contributing to the broader picture of mass incarceration.
Sure. And I'm going to ask everyone to bear with me, just because I'm going to rely on notes. I want to get this right. So excessive sentencing, you know, there are so many people in New York State Prison, in so-called blue progressive New York State Prison, serving massive sentences. And it's been my experience that most people, other than those who've been directly impacted, don't believe it. It's a fact. And I think it's important. There are a couple ways to think about it. I was a public defender as well, and it has always struck me the way that we in the court system, that we sanitize excessive sentencing. Oh, sorry. And by sanitize it, this is what I mean. You'll hear sentences like 50 to life, 75 to life, 45 flat, life without parole, but nobody calls it what it really is meant to be. What it's meant to be, and what that prosecutor asked for that sentence, and frankly, when a judge happens to hand it down, they should call it what it is. I sentence you to die behind bars. That's the truth of it. That's the excessive sentencing that we have in New York State. That's the reality for thousands of people. And when I say thousands, and I know this is really about individuals, not about numbers, but since Noah asked the question, let me just give you some numbers. This is from the March 2025 report from the Department of Corrections in New York State. So some of you might be familiar with the fact that there's been an advocacy push for a long time. And this is going to sound, by the way, partly crazy. But the push is for a 20-year maximum for any crime. It's a hell of a lot of time. That's what we're actually, in New York, that would be mind-blowing, a 20-year maximum. But actually, it would bring this country, it would align the United States with most other similar Western industrialized nations. But rather than a 20-year maximum, this is from the DOC's report, we have 6,667 people today in New York State Prison serving sentences with 20-year minimums, not maximums. And it's these sentences that fuel mass incarceration. And it's because they are etched in stone. And I'll just take 1 minute more to explain what I mean by this. And I'm so glad, Judge Brown, that you mentioned resentencing. So just bear with me. I'll try and give a kind of short overview of when I say the sentence is etched in stone, here's what I mean. When you're arrested in New York State, there's a law. There's a way that you can argue. Your lawyer can bring a motion saying, you know what? Dismiss the case in the interest of justice. Dismiss it because it's the right thing to do. We have that law. And if you are convicted and sentenced to an extreme sentence, as Judge Brown pointed out, on your direct appeal, meaning that first appeal, the appellate court can reduce your sentence in the interest of justice. But you know what happens after 5, 10 years after your direct appeal happens? When you've become a remarkably different person, we do in New York. We have a resentencing law. But you know the problem with that law? There's only one grounds to move. You can only get resentenced if your original sentence was illegal. It doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, who you've become, the support you have, the conditions you're enduring in prison, your sentence will remain. The law in New York State at present doesn't recognize, it doesn't value, it doesn't care about transformation, rehabilitation, growth, change, whatever word you want to call. And the truth is, and this is where I'll close, a sentence, and this is something that was said to me years ago, and it's so true, and it guides a lot of the work that we do. A sentence once imposed, even if to some at the time it was imposed seemed just necessary and appropriate, it doesn't remain so in perpetuity. That's the problem. And unless and until we pass a Second Look Act, unless and until there's a willingness to recognize and value redemption and change, these sentences will continue without any rational justification.
Thank you so much. So, Mujahideen, for the past year, you've been pretty singularly devoted to the Second Look Act, researching it, advocating for it, even authoring an academic study on it. So, for those who need a refresher in the audience today, what exactly is the Second Look Act, and what were the key findings of this report that you put together?
The Second Look Act is a bill being proposed in the New York State Legislature by Senator Julia Salazar and Assemblywoman Latrice Walker. If passed, it would allow incarcerated individuals or their legal representatives to petition a different county judge for a sentence reduction after 10 years of incarceration or 5 years if they have a maximum sentence of 10 years. No one will be excluded from submitting a second look petition based on the type of crime, length of sentence, or age at the time of the offense. Although people who are adolescents or emerging adults at the time of the offense or over the age of 55 when submitting a second look petition will be looked at more favorably for a possible sentence reduction based on the mitigating factors associated with these particular ages. Although the focus of a second look is primarily rehabilitation based on a person's institutional record and positive achievements, it also gives a person the opportunity to present a coherent life narrative to a judge, including whatever adversity, abuse, and trauma led to the crime and the steps that were taken towards healing and personal transformation. This is a critical part of a second look, as you cannot determine how far a person has come until you know from where they began. What I have just stated is some of the key provisions and parameters of the Second Look Act, but now I want to give its fundamental meaning. As Steve Ziman just said, the essence of a second look is that a sentence, once imposed, does not remain just, necessary, and appropriate in perpetuity. Now, I added to that statement. Why? Because the human capacity to change, to the extent that continued incarceration and punishment is no longer morally justifiable. Now, I will give some brief comments about our overall research at the Center for Justice. The makeup of our prison system has changed over the last 15 years. A lot of the excessive sentencing practices associated with the war on drugs have been repealed. The decriminalization of drugs and the increased implementation of alternatives to incarceration has led to a drastic decline in the number of people incarcerated for drugs and nonviolent crimes. However, this has resulted in an increase in the number of people in prison for violent crimes because the excessive sentences for violence have not changed or evolved over the last several decades. Due to the fact that people convicted of violence tend to have the longest sentences and serve the most time, they now make up the majority of an aging prison population in New York. And the elevated health risk of continued incarceration only makes it more costly for the state to care for them. Therefore, reforms that only target nonviolent convictions will only increase the Asian prison population in New York and further subject them to the hazards of incarceration. The excessive sentencing practice of New York and the Asian prison population that it fosters goes against well-known criminological research that shows that people tend to age out of crime. Recidivism data shows that with each ascending age group, there's a significant decline in the recidivism rate. So generally, people age out of crime. And when that maturation process is coupled with transformative processes like a higher education or empowering programs, the recidivism rate shows an even more drastic decline. For example, graduates from Hudson-Link Mercer University have a 3% recidivism rate, and rehabilitation through the art participants have a 2% recidivism rate. Finally, there's growing evidence that crime survivors believe that our punitive system does not provide them the necessary amount of healing. Therefore, more crime survivors are resorting to restorative justice practices and supporting other effective alternatives to incarceration. Many of those who have suffered the greatest harm are not opposed to the release of those who harmed them, provided that they can clearly demonstrate accountability, remorse, and personal transformation. Some of those go as far as advocating for the release of those who harmed them through second look legislation and other mechanisms. The idea that people who suffer from crime only desire the most punitive outcomes is being challenged more and more today.
Thank you very much for that. Patrick, I want to turn to you next. We're seeing serious growing momentum from a range of different stakeholders who are backing the Second Look Act. Tell me a little bit more about the support behind the bill and what's needed to actually make it a reality.
I mean, so in terms of important support in this coalition, well, the judge Marva is for it. I think that's all that you need to know. Our chief judges, our administrative judges are in favor of second look. Our bar associations, the American Bar Association, the New York City Bar Association is in favor of a second look. Many of our corrections experts who do this work, who do reentry work and rehabilitative work, are in support of second look. Many of us formerly incarcerated people who know what it's like on the inside and know what is actually needed to change the system and transform our opportunities when we come home are in support of second look. 68% of New Yorkers, when polled about this legislation, are in support of second look. And that's not even teasing out, the realities of when you ask someone in a poll, do you believe in second chances? Do you believe in opportunities for people who are incarcerated? I'm quite sure that number goes up even further. And so even the business community is in support of second look, right? In New York State, we have a labor shortage. We need workers. They are in support, even if albeit for selfish reasons. They want to see more people home. They want to see a larger labor force. Everyone is in support of second look. The only people, unfortunately, who are not in support of second look are those individuals who believe that their livelihood is based on keeping people in prison for longer periods of time. And so they have a vested interest in not supporting something like second look. But the vast majority of people who recognize what our system is and the human potential that is behind bars, who understand redemption, who understand that people deserve second chances, are in support of second look.
Thank you very much. So the next question was one that we actually posed to our good friend Taden Townsley, who is currently in Sing Sing on a sentence of 42 to life. We're very grateful to have some of his family members in the audience here today. A round of applause for them, please. We asked him what would the passing of the Second Look Act mean to you, and to read his response on his behalf, we have Wilfredo down here.
So for Taden Townsley, to me, the passage of the Second Look Act will mean that society has actually begun to embrace incarcerated citizens. It would demonstrate to me that society sees the humanity in us and realize that we see the humanity in ourselves. I have been incarcerated for over 30 years now, since my adolescence, and I have been left to feel that no one ever has nor ever will believe in my personal growth, rehabilitation, and journey to redemption. In my experience in prison, I've learned that such a feeling serves as fertile soil to help the growth of hopelessness and removes any incentive or desire to change. Why? For what purpose? If people are only going to see you as a criminal or the crime you were convicted of, then why put the effort in? Well, many of us, or I might say most of us, have. Despite society turning its back on us, Most times before we even came to prison or committed a crime, we have matured into adults with the full understanding now of our own humanity and that in others. From a practical perspective, passage of the Second Look Act might mean that I may have a chance to spend time with my elders in my family, such as my father and my grandmother, before they pass. It could mean I won't have to spend another decade in prison before I can live as an adult in a free world. I could be present for my daughter's first child and my first grandchild. Mind you, my daughter was barely 2 years old when I was arrested. Being present would be the first milestone in her entire life I would be present for. And I could finally begin to contribute to society and my community in a way that would help complete the trek of redemption. A second look would actually allow for a first look at critical factors not previously considered during my trial and sentencing, which would allow me to not only present mitigating factors not previously before the court, but it will also allow me to demonstrate the man that I have grown into in my readiness for release. Passage of the Second Look Act would allow me to finally believe in the stated goals of corrections, that it stands on a rehabilitative measure and not a punitive one.
Thank you, Wilfredo, and of course, thank you, Tayden. Brian, so, you know, we're sort of strange bedfellows up here, as you actually oversaw the New York State Department of Corrections, while a number of your fellow panelists up here were actually behind bars. But now, here you are up here, a vocal supporter of the Second Look Act. So this next question comes to you from Michael Teneo, who many of us up here know, and who is in Sing Sing on a sentence of 20 to life. He asks, as the former superintendent of Sing Sing and commissioner of docks, what did you witness from the incarcerated population during your tenure that makes you feel so strongly about giving these folks a second chance?
That's a good question. I know Michael very well. In fact, 2 years ago, I wrote a letter in support for his parole. Michael, it's important, I think, people to realize that Michael has done so many things in prison, but he's not alone. He's not unique. I think people have to understand that the people we're talking about who have succeeded in prison, they're not unique people. What they have become is better people. And I think dealing with Michael and many other people, some in this room today, got me asking the question a long time ago, how long is long enough? At what point do we say, this makes no sense? Forget the money, forget anything else. It just makes no sense. And over the years, I've seen so many men and women change. And that's what I think is really all about, except we do have to acknowledge that when we talk about resentencing and a person goes before the judge, not only are they going to see a different person, but I think it's important for them, the individuals, to explain where they came from. See, I don't think we talk enough about the trauma before going to prison, the mental illnesses before going to prisons, the poverty before going to prison. There's an act that puts people in prison. Okay, we know that. But nobody looks behind the act. Nobody asks the question, why? Why did the person do that? I've met so many men and women who, when they say it, I believe it. They simply made a bad decision at a certain time. Best story I have is a young man, never had a problem in the community, and he wanted to be like everybody else, so he got himself a gun. He went into a bar, never thinking that he would ever use the gun. That's not his personality. However, a situation occurred, his gun was drawn, and he killed somebody. Is a single act of stupidity on a certain day. For that, he got 25 to life. The question becomes, again, at some point, society has to acknowledge that people change. People become different. And I think that's why I really believe in the Second Look Act. It forces society to say to themselves, to us, what's the value of sending somebody to prison if we never let them come home? So Michael raises a good question. I really do believe in it because I believe in the people that I've met.
Thank you so much. Serena, as a leading voice for survivors of domestic violence, why do you see second look resentencing legislation as important? This bill does not specifically mention gender, but in what ways do you see it as promoting safety and justice for women and family members specifically?
Yeah, I think about my own incarceration. I only did 3 years behind bars. I only did 6 months in solitary. But what I think about are all of the women I left behind during that time, and all of the women who have come through the doors of New Hour, 12,000 women to date, who have received enormously egregious sentences. In fact, the sentencing disparities between men and women is vast. And what do we know about our judicial system? What do we know about arresting cops? What do we know about ADAs and DAs? There is an overwhelming judgment of women who commit crimes. You should be home. You should be with your children. Why are you doing drugs? Why did you step into that situation? And in fact, domestic violence survivors, one of which I am, are judged even more harshly in the same court of law that sentences men. And I want to point out someone who's here with me today because she should be on this panel, not me. Deborah Pretlow, we acknowledge you as a DV survivor and as someone who's come home this year and is doing amazing work. I left her behind bars. I left Deborah behind bars. See, I didn't get merit time, I didn't get good time because I had a felony, so I wasn't eligible. So I spent my 21st birthday behind bars. And I left Deborah behind. I came home in 2002. She stayed until last year. That kind of sentencing is inhumane. It is beyond the pale. And when I think about many of the women who come through my doors, Mr. Ricks, we know what Marcy has done to our people for so many years because I hear the stories. Not only do I hear the stories, but my own mother was in Marcy. And the harm that it was well known in terms of how people were treated there. This is something we all know and we all talk about. And what I'd like to say is I went back to Bedford Hills for Tammy Eldridge's graduation. Her daughter LaQuinte is with us here from the seminary school. And I spoke to Tammy in the same gym where we used to do step aerobics on the stage to a VHS tape in 1999. But I spoke to Tammy about her sentence. And what was flooring was that she can't ever come home. And the woman I saw on that stage is a leader, is a mother, is someone who's leading gang-involved young women behind bars into doing stomp dance and into changing their lives. But she doesn't get the chance to come home. That disparity that in itself is a crime that our ADAs and DAs should be held accountable for. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Serena. Thank you. This next question we asked of Michael Hoffler, who's serving a sentence of life without the possibility of parole at Sing Sing. We asked him, how would the passage of the Second Look Act change the culture of prisons in New York State? And reading on his behalf is Brian.
The passage of the Second Look Act will completely transform prison culture. Sadly, but not surprisingly, prison culture is dominated by gang culture. That is because prison is a microcosm of the poverty-stricken neighborhoods that the majority of the incarcerated individuals come from. When people believe that they have no value or purpose in life, the feeling of helplessness and hopelessness will only result in destruction. The passage of the Second Look Act will help counteract the gang culture. It will help the majority of young men and women entering New York State's prison system develop a sense of purpose by giving them hope. For many, it will be the first time they will find themselves in a position to set a goal, accomplish a goal, and reap the benefit of being successful and productive members of society sooner than expected. The passage of the Second Look Act will be the difference between young women and men discovering their true value or continuing on their path of destruction. If given the opportunity to either join a gang or stay in prison longer or find their true values through rehabilitation and have the opportunity to re-enter society earlier than expected as a better person than they were when they entered, most will choose the latter. The New York State criminal legal system is in a perpetual state of emergency, and the passage of the Second Look Act is part of the solution.
Thank you. And thank you to Michael Hoffler for that. You know, one thing that strikes me in this conversation about the DV Survivors Justice Act and the Second Look Act and resentencing legislation more broadly is that this type of legislation is not just about remediating the harms of the past, but also about the profound human capacity for change, which is something that Mujahideen touched on earlier. Wilfredo, can you speak to that point a little bit? You know, I know for a fact that you've been a mentor to so many formerly and currently incarcerated individuals.
You know, it's an oxymoron. The Second Look Act is really a first chance. It's not rehabilitation, it's habilitation. At attaching the "re" to it means that we had some form of opportunity at one given time. A lot of us have already come from disenfranchised communities, and we have our social construct as if it's constructed after prison. A lot of us have had a lot of institutions fail us long before we ever became part of the carceral system. So that needs to be looked at because different communities have different adverse childhood experiences. So that's something that needs to be looked at because a lot of us were destined to fail beginning before we even started to even broach juvenile, to even broach Rikers Island. So we have to kind of take a look at it and realize that the Second Look Act is the ability to show the body of work that you've done in spite of incarceration. So what happens is me out here now, I try to steer people away from that because it's kind of a sexy thing in the 5 boroughs because it's kind of a rites of passage. But what happens is what's different is when life gives you lemonade, you have to find that, or life gives you lemons, you have to find that sugar to make that lemonade. So a lot of times I try to invest that sugar into the young people and the people that are inside by doing what we do now and what a lot of brothers in the audiences are doing. Because I'm not alone, I'm not an outlier, I'm just a small part of the system. There's a lot of brothers in the room that could be on this panel doing the same exact thing with the body of work that they've done to Columbia and other private institutions because all of us were centered in Sing Sing, all of us were part of Columbia. Professor Downey made sure to provide those things in her childhood development classes. And with those particular tools from that Bronifer model, we were able to venture out on our own. I mean, Patrick and I, when we were housed in 5 building in Sing Sing, so we were able to go ahead and kind of develop this bond and had this vision washing sports in the back of the housing unit to say, I'm gonna come out and be great. And a lot of times in spite of is what we've done. And that's what the Second Look Act does, it just accelerates that process. So, being in that habilitative state of mind when you're inside, I mean, my body of work is a small microcosm to a lot of the men in the room. But what I did is when I had the opportunity to be on that platform, I took off ripping and running. And that ripping and running is the gas that gaslights a lot of the guys inside and a lot of young people to realize that if he can do it, I can also do it as well.
Thank you very much. So, Mujahideen, one major section of the report that you've worked on is about the guidance and insight and analysis of our incarcerated scholars at Sing Sing and elsewhere. Obviously, there are a wide range of responses that you heard, but can you summarize some of those insights for us, please?
I'll summarize 2 responses from two of my best friends who have excessive sentences. Taden Townsley, who has 42 years of life with 30 years in, and Raymond Rashid Wallace, who has 50 years of life with 29 years in. They both expressed that the passing of the Second Look Act would be an opportunity to assess whether the objectives of our criminal legal system are being adequately met prior to the conclusion of a sentence. It identifies the fact that people may not need to serve the full terms of their sentences in order to address the flaws in their value systems which led to their incarceration, make the requisite changes, reach a state of rehabilitation, and then apply those redeemable qualities in a way that demonstrates their understanding of living a productive and law-abiding life. Raymond and Tayden, they believe that the Second Look Act is the most practical idea we have to ensure that our criminal legal system is affecting change in the lives of incarcerated people. The last response I would like to relay is from Raymond Rashid Wallace, which a lot of these panelists touched on. He believes that the Second Look Act is a much-needed assessment tool that would allow incarcerated individuals to talk about how their adverse life experiences influence their criminality, so that judges could assess people's level of rehabilitation based on how they overcame those adverse life experiences along with their crimes. There are many incarcerated people who were tried for serious crimes when they were young and incapable of expressing how their adverse childhood experiences contributed to their crimes, so that it could be taken as mitigating factors by a judge. Therefore, Raymond believes that the Second Look Act will actually give incarcerated people a critical first look by allowing them to present risk factors that were not taken into account prior to sentencing. This would allow a person's rehabilitation to be fully conceptualized and demonstrated before a court.
Thank you. So, Steve, this next question comes to you from our dear friend Tayden Townsley, and we actually have some of his family members here today who are going to ask the question on his behalf.
Mr. Ziman, you know how winded Tayden is. Does society, and more pointedly elected officials such as the governor and state legislators, have a duty to rectify the injustices committed over 3 decades ago upon the people who continue to serve out their sentences? Should I read the second part now?
Please.
How might this relate to other laws that have been passed as a result of cases such as Miller v. Alabama, raising the age and changes to the parole statute, which now requires consideration of the defendant's age when the crime was committed?
Thank you. Tayden uses he uses a few very, very critical words. And I want to focus on one, and I really want to speak. I know in many ways it always feels like preaching to the choir out here, but I was so glad to hear that there are some representatives from elected officials, because they're the ones who have to, get the bill passed, right? The bill is there. Get it passed. Get enough sponsors. So I want to speak to them directly in response to because it's really who Tayden is saying, right? The word rectify. And from my perspective, here's the problem. Too often when we discuss second looks, people think you're asking for mercy, beneficence, give someone a break. That has to change. It's not about mercy. And I'd be remiss at this moment if I didn't mention that we don't have a second look act. We don't have a bill yet, but we do have a second look mechanism. And I'm thinking for people like Tayden in particular. Clemency is a second look mechanism. It exists. I don't know how many people in the audience are aware of it. The governor has absolute, unfettered, vast power to commute sentences tomorrow. There are over 1,000 pending clemency applications. Some of them as robust and powerful as Tayden Townsley's that's been sitting there for 3 years. And I mention that for a couple of reasons. One is, I don't know if he's still here. Stanley Bellamy, are you still here? Stanley's in the back. I think as we all think about the Second Look Act and what we can do, there's a movement being led by people like Stanley Bellamy from Release Aging People in Prison to persuade, to push, to make the governor use her clemency power. There's a rally, if I can do this, April 7th at 10:30 in front of the governor's office. Please come. The governor needs to hear from people about why we're waiting for the Second Look Act. She could do this tomorrow. But I also mention it because just like the Second Look Act, every time you talk about clemency, people throw around this word mercy. And what I hope we can do, and I hope we can impress upon elected officials, district attorneys, judges, it's not about mercy. It's an obligation. It's a responsibility. It's to rectify, Tayden's word, it's to rectify the crisis of mass incarceration that has been caused by all these death by incarceration sentences. I'm also struck by one other word that comes up a lot. And I'm sure a lot of the men and women who've been inside, have seen the parole board, are very familiar with this word, accountability. Right? There's an expectation when you're arrested, when you're sentenced, when you come up for parole, that you're going to take responsibility for harm caused. That you're going to express remorse, you're going to try and make things better. And I'm sure everybody here is well aware, and stay with me, I'm going to make the connection here, I hope, of the profound racial disparities in the New York State prison system. So according to the latest census, 14% of the New York State population is identified as black. And yet according to the Department of Corrections, they identify 50% of the people in state prison as black. But stay with me. That disparity, which I think most people already know exists, it gets worse, more profound when you look at who's serving the longest sentences. It increases exponentially. And stay with me one more time. It increases even more when you look at the age when someone was sentenced. So this is some more data for you. I foiled the number of people serving life sentences when their crime of conviction occurred when they were teenagers. Approximately 2/3 of those people are identified by the Department of Corrections as black. 10% are identified as white. So when I say the Second Look Act, and when I say clemency is not about mercy, it's about rectification. It's an obligation to fix this, to the elected officials to do it, to get the bill passed. But I also want to emphasize one other thing, and this is to all my colleagues who are pushing for the bill to be passed. If and when it gets passed, we can't celebrate yet, because the pressure at the same time has to be put on the judiciary and the district attorneys, because we can win the battle and we can lose the war. And why do I say this? And again, I don't know if we have any prosecutors in the audience, but doing this clemency work, and I'm thinking of someone like Tayden Townsley. We've represented over 200 people. That means we've reached out to about 200 district attorneys for support. You want to know how many times they've supported clemency? 1. So my fear is we win the battle, we get a Second Look Act passed, and you know what happens? Prosecutors oppose it, judges therefore refuse to do it. So to me, how do we start to have this conversation? It's to say this is an obligation. This is a responsibility. It's not an act of mercy. Use the power you have to rectify. And I'm grateful to Tayden and his family for making the point.
Serena, the next question is for you, and it comes to us from Tammy Eldridge, whose daughter is in the audience with us.
Hi, Tammy Eldridge, my mother, asks, what should people know about the plight of women with excessive sentences who are often overlooked in these discussions? And the follow-up would be, how would New Hour prepare for our reentry?
Well, I'll start with the hopeful part of this, which is that we pick women up from prison. Last year, we picked up an 82-year-old woman, got her into safe housing, got her support. We picked up Deb Pretlow, and here she is doing amazing things. One of the things that we need more of are community interventions. And my organization has a 2% recidivism rate. My region has a 65% recidivism rate without programs. So what we know is that providing support, like Wilfredo and many of us do, creates solutions and hope. For Tammy, this message is directly for Tammy. We need to do a better job of pushing our elected officials to understand that sentencing women to death cannot and should not exist in the United States. We must also ensure that infants are not ripped away from their mothers at birth in prisons and jails, which is now the case in many, many jails across New York State. And I think lastly, what we know to be true is I was part of the group that passed the Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act, which gives judges the opportunity to look back at a sentence and say, was this crime committed as a direct result of abuse or coercion? And what we know is that this isn't used enough. In fact, one of our women came home after serving 25 years for killing her abuser, and she tried to apply for the DVSJA, was brought back to court in Nassau County, and ADA said, you just got a brochure and read out of a book what a DV survivor is. She was so re-traumatized by having to be retried and then was denied resentencing. So this speaks to the point that Mr. Zeidman speaks about. If we change the law, but there's no implementation, and we don't hold our system accountable, what hope is there? And I'm doing this work because there are too many women who come through my doors who are sentenced to 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And there's 21 and 26 and 28 and 29. I can't take it anymore. We have to do better for our community. And as a Puerto Rican woman, I will say, when I went to prison, I was 21 years old, turned 21, 20 years old. What I saw around me were all black and brown faces. And of the white faces, they were poor and didn't have representation. So when we want to think about how we change the system, we can't stand by and do nothing. We need to call our elected officials every day, and say, LaQuinte's mom, Tammy, deserves to come home. How do you make that happen, Governor Hochul? It is this community that's going to change the world, because you see, we see what's happening, and it is us. It is only us that is the solution.
You know, Second Look mostly tackles transformation within the court system. But Brian, I'm wondering, what impact do you see on corrections?
Well, right now, the Second Look Act is a hopeful dream by a lot of people inside. They're looking forward to it, and they're counting on it. They're working towards it. Once enacted, and men and women are actually resentenced, as promised, it will have a very positive impact on the facility and the atmosphere of the corrections. On the flip side, however, if it doesn't get passed again, it sends the wrong message to those still incarcerated, that maybe society still doesn't care, doesn't understand. So it's really important to get it done for the right reason, and the right reason is because it's the right thing to do. If you want to change the culture of prisons or the prison system, you got to pass good laws and good policies. Without it, nothing changes.
So the next question we posed to our good friend Michael Shane Hale, who is in Sing Sing on a sentence of 50 to life. We asked him, what do you see as the top priorities in this struggle, and what are your preferred strategies for achieving those goals?
So Shane responds, and I think it's appropriate that his very first sentence is a quote from Glenn Martin. The people closest to the problem are closest to the solution. Impacted people are assets to their community, whether behind bars or in the free world. Behind the wall, people are defined by their deficits, their needs, their worst day, their limitations, and not by their skill sets. This happens because the correctional culture cannot exist without demonizing the people it controls, along with the people that support them. This tension finds the voice and vision of people behind the wall as threatening and dangerous. Lots of solutions have come from people behind the walls. Alternative to Violence Project, AVP, we took it, we've been there. Peers for AIDS Counseling and Education, and the work that Kathy Boudin moved forward. Prison education programs to create a safer environment. However, this confuses things in a black and white world, pun intended, where good guys and bad guys are clearly marked to avoid any confusion. So valuable ideas become diffused in the ocean of oppression rather than becoming an island of supportive solutions. In other words, as soon as the incarcerated voices are centered, they are identified as something to control. It's just what the system does. Currently, there is a commissioner who listens, Commissioner Marticello, but that does not happen at other levels. He even goes as far to say that people are sent to prison as punishment, not for punishment. I don't think anyone got the memo.
Thank you, Serena, and thank you to Shane for that wisdom, as always. The next question is for Patrick, and it comes to us once again from Michael Hoffler at Sing Sing. He says, Patrick, while incarcerated, you excelled in the world of academia, which culminated with you receiving your master's in professional studies degree from UTS. At what point during your incarceration did you discover that you had a passion for being of service to others, and how does it feel to be fortunate enough to receive a second chance at life, which enables you to perform that service today?
Thank you for that question. So first of all, Shane, just to talk about Shane for a minute, that quote that you read. So Shane and I were at Shawanga Correctional Facility for a number of years. It was there that we were both a part of the Prisoners for AIDS Counseling and Education program. And so, and the reason that I kind of want to bring this up is because it sort of highlights the ways in which empowered incarcerated people can change culture inside a prison. So Shawanga Correctional Facility is a maximum security prison. When I went there, I had a sentence of 25 to life. And I felt lucky to have a 25 to life sentence because every other person had 40 to life, had life without parole. They were people who had the death penalty, had it converted, and then came to Shawanga, so they had their sentences converted to life without the possibility of parole. Professor Zeidman was very instrumental in getting Roy Bolus and some of my other colleagues out of prison through clemency. They were there at Shawanga Correctional Facility. Roy Bolus had a sentence of 75 to life and did not hurt anyone, right? They founded the Prisons for AIDS Counseling for Education in that program. Kathy Boudin previously started it as AIDS Counseling and Education in '89. And I want people to understand this. In the late 80s, nobody knew what was going on with HIV and AIDS in prison. People were dying, guards were hands off, they don't want to touch you, they don't want to be around you. It was the women who, in those facilities, Kathy Boudin and others, who educated themselves about what HIV/AIDS was, started holding classes, started teaching other people about what it was to be HIV positive, and how you protect yourself, and how we get more resources for those people who are suffering. That model came to Shawanga. Jassy started it in 1990, and a lot of us who were part of that program who learned so much about what it is to be involved in service and to help support other people. This is the sort of thing that would have someone be able to avail themselves of a second look, right? If you're someone who went in for a violent crime, who was seen as a selfish person, but you started a program that helped other incarcerated people deal with HIV/AIDS, chances are that you're going to be able to avail yourself of a second look and have your sentence readjusted. Now, for me, I forgot the question. No, I'm joking. I'm messing with you. I'm messing with you. So
He asked, how does it feel to be fortunate enough
I'm joking. So when I first came to Shawanga, I was very lucky to be around people like Jose Saldana, who's now the executive director of releasing aging people in prison. People like Derek Hamilton, Larry White. Rest in peace to Larry White. These were individuals who were mentors, Shoaib Abdul Rahim, I can't forget Shuaib. These were men who took a lot of us young people under the wing, got us involved in organizational work, got us involved in service. And initially for us, we're young coming into the system, and we're like, I'm just trying to do my time. I just want to figure out when my appeal is going to come up. I need to get out of here. During that time, these mentors were grabbing us to say, look, Patrick, you're kind of smart. We need a secretary at the CAU. And I'm like, I ain't nobody's secretary. No, bro, you're going to take minutes. You're going to be a part of, all right, I get it now. They trained me. They grew me into that. Now I'm the vice president. Now I'm the president of the organization. Now I'm responsible for the people. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was being fortunate enough to be around other individuals that saw something in me and put me in the position to help other individuals. And over time, it became a thing like, yo, I'm actually kind of good at this. This is a good thing that I'm doing. So it's something that happens passively. It's about being around the right people in the right environment and having really good, strong mentors and having people who actually believe in you. That is very key, and I think that is one of the most disheartening things about the prison system itself, is that it sends a message that the people who are there are not worthy and they don't have any value, they don't have anything to contribute, and the guards will treat you like that. And so it's up to us formerly incarcerated people, the people who live in those spaces, to actually lift each other up and say that I see value in you. I see that you have something to give. I see that you are a person who has compassion, no matter what other people say. I see you, I see the tough stares and all that. You're a sweetheart. Be your authentic self and be that sweetheart and help other people get through this situation just like you're trying to get through it.
Thank you, Patrick. Well, Fredo, the next question comes to you from Shane Hale again. He has an interesting question. He's wondering, how would the Second Look Act reduce crime?
I mean, the Second Look Act is really true public safety. If you turn around and you utilize the people that are actually putting in the work in the most darkest of places, imagine how vital they could come out to be mentors and how to come out to be real credible messengers, because that model is becoming a little bit blurry as we start to move forward now in today's society, where it kind of needs a shot in the arm. So for me, I feel like a lot of those individuals that I've left behind, like Michael Hoffler or Taden Townsley, who was a good friend who actually see my transformation, and a lot of people in the room have seen my transformation from Greenhaven or from Auburn, where I didn't have that road as Patrick lucky to get to Shawanga. I had to go box to box, and I finally ended up at a spot where someone said, and a lot of comrades said, you need to come to the school building. I said, come to the school building for what? The yard's outside. We going outside. So a lot of us know what it is when we want to go out when it's hot. We want to take a shower every day. We want to be able to lounge out and hang out and play dominoes and have a lot of backbiting conversations. Yeah, a lot of people in the room remember those days. And then all of a sudden everybody said, come on down to this school building. We're giving out this good old education. There's a couple of clerks in the room that were part of that. I was part of the long-term responsibility project from the Osborne Association, which kind of really taught me about my social construct and what my parole package would look like. A lot of people don't even have the courage to talk about the crime they committed or a lot of the experiences or traumas that yoked them prior to incarceration. So able to find that support group within each other, as Patrick would support, as a lot of the men were in support with each other. I mean, we ate together, we laughed together, we were locked down together 24 hours when we had a lot of Greenhaven lockdowns. I mean, I'm not somebody that is privy to, what solitary confinement is. So for my thing is I had to kind of get through my growing pains, and I think it was about the age of 36 when I realized I was tired. So I decided I'm removing myself from gang activity. And if you don't like it, then we can all deal with it in the yard as men like we always have done. Violence is something that I've never been shy away from. So my thing is when I finally met Sing Sing, it taught me, and that's the only place where you can go from a GED to a master's degree. We're now UTS, but it was theological seminar. So for me, it was real different that everybody wanted to work on change. Everybody was at school doing voluntary therapeutic programs. I said, what? This is something I've never been involved with at all. And then when I started to gravitate to it, I became, as Patrick, I became a mentor. As a clerk for the Osborne Association, I put over 500 men in a 10-year span through the parenting program. So I was integral in using those voluntary therapeutic programs as stepping stones. So we use those stepping stones to go ahead and be on disciplinary probation until finally Miss Muhammad decided that she was going to give us an opportunity at College for Mercy, rest in peace. And it was people like her that saw things in me that I didn't even see for myself. I came out of Seg from Greenhaven, and I didn't know what I was going to do. But I helped a lot of people. A lot of people taught me a lot of things along the way, and I just became a vanguard of the culture in Sing Sing where, you know, I passed the baton to other people similar to what happened with Patrick's experience at Shawanga, and I'm just very humbled to be here today to be able to share my narrative and show my social construct and the effort that I put into the work today.
Thank you, Wilfredo. So we're starting to wrap up here, but we wanted to end before we turned it over for Q&A with a few words from some of our many incarcerated scholars at Sing Sing who helped shape our second look report. You'll hear from Michael Hoffler, as read by Steve, Shane Hale, as read by Patrick, and Paul Cortez, as read by Mujahideen. We all asked them the same question, which is, how do you envision a world without prisons?
This is from Michael Hoffler. A world without prison is a world where humanity would be the primary virtue. It's a world where we can understand that we are all human, and many of us make mistakes, but we can heal from those mistakes without perpetuating harm. We can live in a world where we can use other mechanisms to help punish and or repair the harm. More importantly, it will be a place where all systems focus to build each other up, not to isolate and denigrate classes of people because of their race, color, class, or creed.
Michael Shane Hale. A world without prisons means communities have to step up by embracing a village mentality. Community members have to work on connecting family and industry while combating poverty and lack of opportunity. The hard work of implementing alternate forms of policing and justice means empowering the community to decide its futures while learning from the past and the wisdom of community elders.
The final response will be from Paul Cortez, who says, we must first concede that our world with prisons is no more safe than one without. As more prisons have been built, crime and violence have only increased. We must ask ourselves why. Indeed, prisons are one of the primary drivers of generational violence, perpetual poverty, and dilapidated communities. Can anyone truly argue that prisons are a long-term solution for crime? A world without prison is the liberative justice model that repatriates millions of dollars back into community development, such as stronger school systems, local small business owners and entrepreneurs, and affordable and safe housing. Money used for prisons is instead funneled back into the most crime-impacted communities to address root causes of crime, which are lack of education, poverty, and broken families.
Thank you. Patrick, I know you had something of a call for action that you wanted to end with before we turned it over to Q&A. Anything you wanted to share there?
Say again?
I know you had something of a call for action that you wanted to deploy before we turned it over to Q&A here.
I have several. But primarily, so we are here to, in support of Second Look, and so we really need everyone to not take this opportunity for granted, to really get on your grind, make those phone calls, call your elected officials to make sure that this bill gets passed in this legislative session. Like, this is going to be our best opportunity to get this passed. We need to get this done right now. The other thing that I would add to that, for those of us that do this work, now, to my heart, I'm an abolitionist. I don't believe in prisons as an institution. I don't believe that they solve problems. I believe they create more harm than good. I need for all of us to really think about what a real world without prisons looks like. What does a world that centers transformative and restorative justice at the heart of the system mean? And even as I'm here, thinking about our brothers and sisters who are behind the wall, who are dealing with this, it is just so crucial for us to reimagine a different sort of world in which our people can come home, in which survivors are heard, because the current system does not allow the opportunity for survivors to be heard, no matter what the narrative that you're being told. How do we reimagine a different sort of world? We need to put our heads together and really think about what that new world looks like. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we will turn it over to all of you. If anybody has any questions, feel free. I promised their first question first, though. The woman on the left in the Community is Not Cages sweatshirt.
First of all, I want to commend the panel. You all are great, but as a family member, I'm going to tell you why the Second Look Act is so very important to families. I'm the mom of a son that's going into his 28th year of incarceration since he's 15. If we would have had the Second Look Act, I'm sure he would have been home already. So now, if there's any families in the audience, please advocate with your legislators for the Second Look Act for your loved ones, to give them that second chance, because families need hope as well as those inside. And I feel for the children of the incarcerated, as well as parents like myself who have incarcerated. And Mr. Ricks, you and I have connected, and you know. And I gotta thank CCA for the Communities Not Cages bill. Being a family leader with them has really brought it out, the awareness for those that have excessive sentencing. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so there's a question back here.
Good evening. My name is Rachel. It's not really a question. I think what we all have to do tonight, and since I've been fighting for Robert Brooks and what happened to him, we have to ask ourselves, and we have to ask this country, why is it that this country, the most developed country on planet Earth, has the most incarcerated people? We have to know that incarcerating people is not the answer. Why are we so reactive as opposed to proactive? We don't have community centers for these children. We're not promoting the nuclear family. We're doing everything backwards. We know who's putting the guns in the black communities. We know who's putting the drugs in the black community. We know that it is wealthy Caucasian men that are building these prisons and that are giving these police officers carte blanche to do whatever they want to our people. And all those men in prison, you decimate a community, because those are husbands, those are fathers, those are sons. And we can't be okay with this. And we can't sit here. It irks my nerve to sit here and talk like this is okay. This is not okay to incarcerate people. We couldn't even deal with COVID at home. And we're sending men into prisons and for 20 years and 30 years, like we're giving out candies. You're destroying lives. You're destroying communities. This is not okay.
Okay. Just in the name of time, what?
Sorry. So thank you for that statement. And I want people to think about something. In Brownsville, where I do a lot of youth services work, the average median income is somewhere around $30,000, $33,000, $35,000. It costs upwards of $500,000 a year to house someone on Rikers Island. And I want you to think about it. Rikers Island is pre-detention, right? So if you're in there for a charge with a violent crime, you may be there for 3-4 years before you even get your case adjudicated. So that's, what, $2 million that we're going to spend to house someone pre-detention who's not being convicted, funds that could well be served in the community to prevent people from coming to prison to begin with. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. We have to reimagine something different in our system.
Oh, yeah. And so I'm trying to combine questions as folks. So there's a question that is, how soon could this legislation actually be passed? And what is the information that if they wanted to talk to their peers and empower them to speak to their legislators, what are the key points that should be shared with their peers to then share with the legislators?
You gotta ask me twice. So the first thing is, as we've suggested earlier, is that this is a rectification of a system that we know is heavily racialized, right? So this gives the opportunity to correct some of the racial disparities that happen within the system. Also, the fact that ultimately it is there to incentivize people to do better, to be the best versions of themselves, right? Second Look isn't like the Earned Time Act where you could passively get time off your sentence. This is something where you have to be really proactive in demonstrating to a judge that I've transformed and that I've changed my life. What would that look like for the prison if you had a collective of individuals who were of the mind frame that, look, I need to transform who I am. How do I demonstrate this change? That's a driver in changing culture within the prison itself. And ultimately, we want our people home. Prison is not something that is focused on redemption. It is punitive. It is about controlling black and brown bodies. It is harmful. And to be clear, the college programs that are inside prison, the Osborne associations, all of these organizations that come in and do work, that's not what prison is. Those things could be gone tomorrow. When Pataki came in office, he eliminated college programming overnight. People were like midway going through their degrees and had to just abandon college because it wasn't there anymore. These things are ornaments on the Christmas tree. They are not what prison is. And so when you look at what prison actually is and the ways in which it damages people and perpetuates harm, this is what we want to communicate to people when we're doing this work.
And how soon can this legislation actually be passed and enacted?
The legislative session ends in June. We want enough votes to get it passed right now so that it can be enacted forthwith by, September, October, or by the following year.
Okay. And then one final combo question, just in the name of time, which is, how does will this act help those who are on parole in any way? What benefit would it have, or are there any legislations that would help those on parole, was a question. And then a question is, what's key information that family members should be telling their loved ones who are incarcerated about how to prepare for, if this legislation gets passed, how to submit for the second look?
If this legislation gets passed, I think everybody should be putting in the work regardless. So the loved ones that be able to speak to your, the people that you love that are incarcerated, you have to be able to let them know that they have to start working on their rehabilitative process now. I mean, a lot of them, if they have extended sentences, they're going to the parole board, whether they're dealing with restorative circles or they're in voluntary therapeutic programming. I mean, you have to put in the work if you're going to be able to come out here and be productive in society, because you have a lot of other challenges that are coming out. When I first came out, I was first going to a shelter. Then after that, I decided I was going to a single room occupancy from the Thrive the Life Prison Project, and I had to stay there, and then eventually I ended up getting my own apartment. But see, the thing about it is that I put a lot of networking and a lot of effort into my own rehabilitative process. By the culture that was perpetuated at Sing Sing, it was a privilege to go to Sing Sing. So my thing about it is that place right there kind of was a springboard that I utilized to get there. I think I remember in the article in the Daily News, they were joking around and said Sing Sing was the Ritz Plaza of prisons. Well, I like to see someone go ahead and stay in that Ritz for 20 years, and then after give me your shot to be in a cardboard box underneath a highway, because I'm going to make it by hook or crook. So I just feel sometimes that the media kind of spins certain things where take a lot of the adverse childhood experiences I had at the age of 9, 10, 11, and 12, and let's see if you really want to go ahead and swap spots with me to get some higher education for free.
So I hope this conversation continues. I know there's still some outstanding questions, but in the interest of time, we wanted to wrap up. There is food in the back, and more importantly, there are flyers in the back with all the information that you might need about the legislation, about calling your legislators, taking action, and getting involved in this community. Thank you so much to everybody for coming tonight. Thank you to Union. Thank you to CCA. Thank you to the Communities Not Cages Coalition. Thank you to Judge Brown. And thank you to Mr. Ricks. We are incredibly grateful. There's real power in this room, and we hope you'll continue this fight with us. Thank you.